Welcome to my channel, Rubia Stedman. In this video I want to teach you how to knit this beautiful hat. It's inspired by one that I saw in the Vampire Diary, season 6. I created my own design. It's inspired by that one. I hope you guys like it and give it a try, and here is the listing material you're gonna need to make. To make this knitted hat, this is the yarn I'm gonna use. They are Isat Mizrahi Craft. I bought these ones at Michael's. They have 300 meters or 100 grams. They are 90% acrylic, 5% polyamide, and 5% metallic. I don't know what polyamide is. So they are medium 4, but it's a thin medium 4. That's why I'm gonna use 2 to double them up. And the color is Imperial. If you don't have this one and you have loops and thread, my all-time favorite loops and thread I use for everything, you can use one of these. If you look at this one and this one, the loops and thread is a little bit thicker. That's why I need 2 of these. So you're gonna need, what is it? A cable needle. The netting needle 7mm. We don't can use circular needle because we are going to do a fantasy stitch, and if you do fantasy stitch you have to work the front and the back of the stitch. You don't can go around. You're going to need marker to make life easier to know when you're going to change the stitch, and a pom-pom. I bought this one in eBay from China and it's gorgeous. If you don't have a place to buy these ones, you can make your own pom-pom. So I already made one hat to figure out a design. It's this one here. I'm gonna do the red one a little bit different than this one, and I'm gonna explain you now what I'm gonna do different than this one. For this one I have 4 of these fantasy stitch in here. For the red one, I'm gonna make 3. And here, beside the cable, I have 2 pearls and 2 pearls. This time, I'm gonna do fine net in one side and fine net in the other one. That way, the cable will look more wide, a little bit flat, but wider. And the cable in this one is 12 stitches, 6 and 6. So in the red one will be 5 and 5. So I'm going to add those stitches to the side. I'm going to cast them exactly the same amount of stitches, 64 stitches, but I'm going to do those changes for the red one, okay? So this is, they're going to be exactly the same size. So, and this is the same yarn. The only difference that the color of this one is blue. Okay, so you see the pom-poms, they look really cute. So let's start making something else that I forgot to mention is that you're gonna need a piece of paper, a pen, or a pencil to keep track of what you're doing. I already did here in this piece of paper everything that I'm gonna do in the hat. So I'm gonna cast on 64 stitches, and I'm gonna do 16 row of border of 2 net to purl. That's what I did for this one, 16 row, and that's why it looks so nice with this folded like this. And the stitch is the repetition of 2 rows, row 1 and 2. And the only thing that will change is in row 5 that you will do the cable. In row 15, 25, and 35 you will do the cable on those 10 net. Everything else stay the repetition of row 1 and 2, 1 and 2. And it's very easy because this stitch in here is 2 net, yarn over, and 2 together in a net stitch. 2 net, yarn over, and 2 together in a net stitch, and again 2 net, yarn over, and 2 together in a net stitch. That's the repetition of this in here, and then the rest will be net. Okay, in the right side and purl in the wrong side, and these stay the same in the right and wrong side. So it's very easy. It's just you'll see. So now we need to leave a tail for casting on or 64 stitches. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wrap 34 times in here. Once I have my 34, I will pull it from the needle, I will fold it in half and leave a little extra, and I will have my tail to cast on my 64 stitches. Once you have the tail long enough for casting on, you're gonna do slip knot, and you're gonna cast on 64 stitches, nice and loose. So I'll meet you here when I have those 64 stitches. And remember, I'm using 2 strands of yarn together, so I want to look like I have more, but I had to count like this. Okay. Once you finish casting on your 64 stitches, with the tail you're going to do a knot in here, not too tight, just to secure the first stitch. And we don't need the markers yet. We're going to do just 2 net, 2 purl, 2 net, 2 purl for 16 rows. So you only have to keep track of the rows. So 2 net and 2 purl. Net and 2 purl. So 2 net. And 2 purl. Like that, you're going to continue all the way to the end, and that will be row number 1. I finished my first row, and I start with 2 net and I finish with 2 purl. So I'm going to do that same repetition. I'm going to start with 2 net and 2 purl, 2 net, 2 purl, 2 net, 2 purl, and I will finish with 2 purl at the end, and I start all over again with 2 net, and so on for 16 rows. So remember, depend on the size of the needles that you use is the size of the hat. This is an adult size hat, only with 64 stitches, and it's because I'm using size 7mm. If you use a smaller needle, like a 6mm, the hat will be smaller with those 64. And if you use a 5mm, it will be almost like a baby size hat. And depend to the thickness of the yarn. I finished with this part of the hat, and it measured 12.5 centimeters or 5 inches. This was my 16th row, so I'm giving you the measurement. That way you can guide yourself by the measurement as well if you're using a total different yarn. So you know. So that was a 16th row. Now we're going to start the design of the hat. And we're going to start in the right side of the piece. And this is the right side because the tail is in the front at the same way as the tip. That's the right side of our hat. And we're going to start, it will be row 17, but for me it will be row number 1 because I start counting my design from this row on. Okay? We're going to start row number 1, and it's very easy. So you're going to start with 5 net. 3, 4, and 5. We're going to continue with net, but since we want to separate the cable, we're going to put a marker. We're going to net 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So we're going to continue with netting, but we're going to place the marker to separate the next 5. So 5 more net. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now we're going to separate the fantasy stitch that we're going to do with a marker. That way it's easier for us to follow as we work. So we're going to do 2 net, yarn over, and since we're going to do 2 net together, the yarn over is just to bring the yarn to the front, and then from the front you do these 2 together, and that creates, you see, the yarn over in here. And we're going to repeat that 2 more times. 2 net, yarn over, and 2 together in a net stitch. And we have to do it 1 more time. 1, 2 net, yarn over, and 2 together in a net stitch. And we have worked half of our stitches. So we have the other half in here that we had to repeat exactly the same as we did in here. I'm going to place my marker in here, and then I do 5 net, place the marker, 10 net, place the marker, 5 net, place the marker, and then you're going to do 2 net, yarn over, 2 together in a net stitch 3 times. So I will show you one more time how to continue. Again, we're going to do 5 net, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're going to place a marker, and again we're going to do 10. This is for the next cable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Place the marker. 5 more net. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And place the marker, and now we're going to do the fantasy stitch. So it's 2 net, yarn over, that is yarn to the front, and 2 together in net stitch. And you're going to repeat that twice more. So it's 2 net, yarn over, and 2 together in a net stitch. And the last 2 net, and yarn over, so yarn to the front, and 2 together in a net stitch. And like that you finish this row. We finished row number 1, and that was on the right side. So now for the row number 2 will be in the wrong side, so all the nets will be purls, except the fantasy stitch. You will do the fantasy stitch exactly the same as the right side. You always work the fantasy stitch the same in the wrong and in the right side. So in here you start with 5 net and you finish with a fantasy stitch. When you turn your work around, you will start with a fantasy stitch and you finish with 5 purls. Now we're going to do 2 net, And the second knit is the yarn over, then yarn over, and 2 together and a knit stitch. To knit, and always the second knit is the yarn over. So if you make a mistake, you'll have to undo your work and do the yarn over, because you have to have the yarn over, otherwise your work don't gonna look right. And then 2 knit, yarn over, and 2 together. So now I'm going to show you how you're going to undo your work if you make a mistake of missing a yarn over. You always go under and grab those 2 that you did together, pass it through your needle, and take it out and pull the yarn. Remove that yarn over, and this is the yarn over that I did in the row before. You go from the front to the back, do your yarn over, and remove the stitch from here. The next one is just a knit, so you go under, grab 1 stitch, remove this one. The next one is 2 together, so you have to grab those 2, remove this one, and always pull into the back, that way you don't lose your stitches. The next one is the yarn over, so from the front, not from the back to the front, you have to go from the front to the back and do the yarn over. Remove the stitch. The next one is a knit. The next one 2 together. And when you do like this, you go where that stitch coming out, right straight to the back, and that way you grab the 2. You remove that one, you see you have your 2 in here. The next one is a yarn over, so you come here, remove that one. And then the last one always get too small, but there it is. And like that, you undid your work. So you will have to turn your work around and do the same in here. So for example, I go here, the 2 together, remove. You see, I don't have to remove a yarn over because I just had to bring this to the back, because this is the first row. So that's how you will fix your mistake if you miss a yarn over. I had done that before, so I got a little bit of practice on doing this. So now we're going to show you how to do this second row all the way to the end. Again, you're going to start with 2 knit, because we're working in the wrong side, but the fantasy stitch always stay the same. Yarn over, and 2 together, and a knit stitch. And you're going to repeat that twice. 2 knit, and the second knit is the yarn over from the row before. So you're going to do yarn over and 2 together and a knit stitch. 2 knit, and yarn over, and the last 2 together and a knit stitch. Now you're going to do 5 pearls. Three, 4, and 5. You're going to pass the marker and do your 10 pearls for the cable. So you're going to work your stitches as you see them. Nine and 10. Now you're going to pass the marker, and again you're going to do your 5 purl for the other side of the cable, and then again you're going to do your fantasy stitch and repeat again what you did on the purl stitches. Okay, so as the repetition, half and half of the hat is exactly the same, 32 stitches and 32. We finished row number 2. Now row number 3 is the repetition of row number 1. Row number 4, the repetition of row 2. And row number 5 is the repetition of row number 1, except that we're going to do the cables on those 10 nets. Okay? So you're going to start with 5 net, 10 net, 5 nets, the fantasy stitch, 5 net, 10 net, 5 net, and the fantasy stitch, and row number 3. Now we're gonna do row number 4, that is a repetition of row number 2, and we're gonna start with the fantasy stitch, and then 5 pearls, 10 pearls, 5 pearls, fantasy stitch, 5 pearls, 10 pearls, and 5 pearls. Okay. Now in row number 5, we're going to work our cable. So we're going to start with our fine net. And 5. Now we're going to do the cable and these 10 nets. So now with my cable needle, I'm going to separate these first 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to pass it to the back. And I'm going to net these other 5. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If you like, you can pass these 5 back to this needle. But what I'm gonna do is with this one, I'm gonna net these 5. Okay? It's easier for me. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now you're going to continue with the repetition of row number 1, 5 net, the fantasy stitch, 5 net, and then in this 10 we're going to do the cable again. Okay. Again, I'm going to pass this 5 net to the back for the cable, and I'm going to net this other 5, and after that I will net the 5 on my cable needle and continue with the 5 net and the fantasy stitch. Here I finished row number 5. So now we're going to do row number 6. Row number 6 is the repetition of row number 2. And in row number 2 you're going to do the fantasy stitch, 5 purl, 10 purl, that's behind the cable, 5 purl, fantasy stitch, 5 purl, 10 purl, and 5 purl. Row number 7 will be the repetition of row number 1, and that will be 5 net, 10 net, 5 net, fantasy stitch, 5 net, 10 net, 5 net, and fantasy stitch. And that's the repetition that you're gonna do. So row number 6 is the repetition of 2, row number 7 of 1, row number 8 repetition of 2, row number 9 of 1, 10 repetition of 2, 11 repetition of 1, 12 repetition of 2, 13 repetition of 1, and 14 repetition of 2, and 15 is repetition of this row number 5. That is where we're going to do the cables again. So every 10 row you're going to do your cable stitch, okay? So I'm gonna work off camera until row 14, doing those 2 rows repetition, and then I will meet you here to show you how to do the cable. But this time, and instead of working my 5 stitches with this one, I'm going to place them back to the needles, and I will show you doing that way, okay? And I'm going to leave in the description box. I don't know how to write pattern, so I'm doing my best. I'm going to leave the repetition of those 2 rows. That way you can write on a piece of paper and you know how to continue those 2 repetitions. But remember, it's my best. Maybe it's not the way that people write pattern, but I don't know how to do it. So I try my best doing that. So I will leave that information in the description box. That way you can continue. So I will see you here in row number 14. I've done half of the design of row number 11. And it will look like this. So that's why I do a net in the border of the cable. That way it's a little more thick, some part of the hat. Because here in Canada the winters are really cold and I don't want to do this open stitch too big, but I like the design. So that's why I decided to do more of the nets beside the cape. So I've done half of my stitches, that is 32. And I will show you one more time how you gonna do your stitches. That way you get more familiar. And exactly what I did from here to here is like starting all over again from here again. Okay, so let's find net. Then net. And it's much easier with the markers because you can see where you have to do your cable, or where you have to do just the fine nets, or where you start the fantasy stitch. Much easier. So my other fine net. And then here really you need just the marker, that way you know the 10 stitches for the cable. And make the crossing of the stitches much easier. So now the fantasy stitch, and you see whenever you do the yarn over is where the stitch is open. Look how nice that looks. So 2 net. Yarn over. So the yarn over is really easy because it's just bringing the yarn to the front. So when you're gonna net your 2 stitches, you see you're doing the yarn over the needle. To net, yarn over, 2 together, and a stitch. To net, yarn over, and 2 on the side. So remember, I work my videos in Spanish and English. So half of this design I did in Spanish, now the other half in English. And when I work in the wrong side, I'll do the same. My first half in Spanish and then the other half in English. It was exactly the same. I start here with my fantasy stitch. So from the half on is again exactly the same with the fantasy stitch. So you do 2 net, yarn to the front, and now 2 together in a net stitch. So you see when you put those 2 together and you bring the yarn to do that net, you're doing your yarn over it here. 2 net, yarn to the front, 2 together in a net stitch, and 2 net, yarn to the front, and two together, and let's stitch. So with the marker, you can be watching TV, and each time you touch a marker, you know that you have to pay attention at the next stitch that you're supposed to do. So it's very easy to keep track of your work. So I only had to do row 13 and 14, that's repetition of row 1 and 2, and in row 15 we're going to do the cable. Now we're going to start row 15, and we're going to do our cable in this one. So we're going to start with our fine net. Now we're going to grab our cable needle, and we're going to grab these 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we're gonna pass to the back. And if you start with the first cable here with a stitch in the back, so you have to continue with the stitch going in the back. If you start with a stitch in the front, you have to continue with the stitches on the front, okay? The first 5. So you're gonna do your other fine net. Now you're going to place back this one in here, or you can work with this one, but I mentioned that I wanted to do it by passing it, just to show you how you're going to pass one at a time. Place them back in your left hand needle, push them a little bit, that way you don't lose any stitches, and then continue with your netting of these 5. After you net those 5, you pass your marker, net 5, do the fantasy stitch, and then do your fine net, and when it's time to do the cable again, I will meet you here. So after that, you're going to continue working by yourself until row number 36. And in row, this is row 15, we're doing the cable, and then you'll do in row 25 and in row 35. I'm going to do the next cable, and I'm going to pass these 5 net to the cable needle, and then I'm going to net the other 5, and then place those 5 from the cable needle back to my netting needles, and then continue with the stitch. That will be 5 more net and the fantasy stitch. here I finished row 15, so now you're going to repeat those 2 rows from row 16 to 24. So in row 16 will be the repetition of row number 2 and 17 of 1 and then 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 until row 24, and then in row number 25 you will do the cable, and then you continue with those repetitions until row 35 that you do the cable one more time, and then you will do row number 36, that will be repetition of row 2, and then I will meet you here to do the decrease, that will be row 37, 38 and 39, okay? And then when I've done a few more rows, I will show you how the stitch is coming along. Here I'm working in row 19, and this is how the design looks so far. Really nice, I'm loving it. So the cable, you see, it's like this. Usually you have the pearls in here, that way you can see the cable more, but I love this one this way for this hat, especially with this design in here and at the end. So I just wanted you to see what I'm done so far. So I'm in row 19, so I will meet you here in row 36. Here I have my 36th row done, and the hat measure from here to here 31 centimeter. I know it's long, but remember, when we fold this part here, it's a very big fold. That's why we did our 16 row. It will look amazing and will keep your ears and forehead warm, because the hat have some fantasy stitch, so it's not that thick, but in this part will be thick enough that you can wear it in the winter. So, and it looks fantastic. So now we want to start with our decrease on row 37. So the decrease are 2 together in a net stitch in the right side. That's row 37. Row 38 will be 2 together in a purl stitch, and row 39 2 together in a net stitch. Okay, and then after that we're gonna cut the yarn, close our hat in the top, and at the same time, if you doing a pom-pom like this one, you know, just with a little loop like this, you also at the same time you're closing the hat. If you made a pom-pom, and then you can put it on after you finish sewing your hat. So we're gonna start with 2 net together and 2 net. Now you can remove all your markers, we don't need them anymore. So we're gonna grab this one, remove the marker, place it back, and do 2 together. Like this, you're gonna work in this entire row. So you're gonna continue doing 2 together and 2 together and removing the markers until the end of this row. Now in the next row, you're gonna do 2 together in a purl stitch, and we're almost done. And then the next row will be 2 net together, 2 net together. So now we're gonna work in row 39, and it will be 2 together in a net stitch and 2 together until the end. After that, you're gonna cut a tail long enough for sewing, and it had to be long enough because you have to close the hat and then sew all the way, you know, to the bottom. So, and this one is 2 net together and 2 and 2. So now you're gonna cut the strand of yarn long enough, and I mean, it's better to have extra than not enough. You're gonna cut it, pass it through the needle, and then we're gonna work on our hat. I'm gonna pass the yarn all the way again through those stitches to make sure that it's nice and secure. And then after that I will sew a little bit, place the pom-pom, and then continue sewing our hat. Here I'm going to start sewing the side and try to sew as even as you can. And I think I cut too much tail. So you're going to sew back and forth. So if you are using a pom-pom like mine that have a little loop, you will attach the pom-pom with this tail. If you made your own pom-pom, then when you finish sewing your hat, you will attach your pom-pom. So now I'm gonna go back to the center. That way I can sew the pom-pom in place. See, I'm nice in center. And I'm gonna pass my needle through the loop. So I will pass the yarn one more time through that loop. That way it's extra secure. So there's no way that this pom-pom will fall off. Now I'm going to pass my yarn to the inside. And I'm going to secure this pom-pom in place here. So now I will weave my yarn into the same place I stopped sewing and continue sewing the side of the hat. I'm sewing right on the border of my next stitch. And in this side, I'm sewing in my purl. You'll have a little, like a bump, and in that space is what I'm passing the needle through. So I'm going to continue doing this all the way at the side of the hat until the place where I will flip the border inside out. So that part I will have to sew it through the inside. I finished sewing this pattern here, and you see it's nice and even until the border here, and you don't see the seam. It's perfect. So now what we're gonna do, since this part will be inside out when we put it on, we're gonna bring the hat inside out, and we're gonna sew this part through the outside in here. These two together like this, it will be perfect. So exactly the same as you've been sewing so far. I'm gonna be doing this part, okay? And make sure that your piece is even, okay? Well, I finished my hat, and this is the leftover yarn. So with this I will crochet a cross dress or something, just with one strand in the future. Something I will make with that. So is perfect, exactly how I visualize my hat, because this one was made, you know, just as we work the hat, okay? Because I made this one first, but I found this one a little too open in here. This is good for a day that is not that cold outside. You see? It's exactly the same amount of stitches, 64 stitches for both of the hat, and they're different because the braid, the cable, are different. This cable is made with 16 stitches and this one with 20. This one here is a regular cable with 12 stitches, 6 and 6, and 2 stitches of purl on each side. That way the cable stands up a little bit more, and the rest of the stitches were made the fantasy stitch, so an extra fantasy stitch on each side. So, and instead of 3 I have 4. Okay, so in this one I have 3, and this wider. Perfect. I love my hats. It's very easy to do. You follow those 2 rows. You can make this. You see, you don't see any seams. Here is the seam. I just see it a little bit because in here it's a little not as straight as this one, but other than that, it's perfect. So I'm gonna put it on in my mannequin and I will show you the end result. This make fantastic Christmas present. Here I'm giving you a sneak peek what my next project will be. I want to make these hats. I love them. It's like my favorite hat that I made so far. The way they feel, the way they look, and the stitch. They are done with circular needle and a fantasy stitch. It's only one continuous row. You don't need a marker or anything. It's just you work until you have the length. First you do the border and then the stitch, and you can make them for a man or a woman, you know, depend on the color. These are loops and threads, Charisma, by the Michael. They have many colors, and the yarn do the change of color like that. So this is mine. This is for my husband. And these hats are made. This is the right side of the hat. So you can wear them both way, but my favorite part is the inside out. That you can see the beautiful stitch like that. And it's a slouchy. You put it on and they look really nice in the back. And they're done only with 60 stitches, and in the afternoon you can do this hat. Watching TV, I made these hats. So that will be my next project. Well, this is the blue one. I don't know if you can appreciate the stitch. When we put it on, it looks amazing. And the pom-pom and make it look even more awesome. I had to remove the little wig of my mannequin because each time I try to put the hat on and fold the brim, the wig always fell off. But it looks amazing. So now I'm gonna put on the red one. And this is amazing with this wide brim. Like this is the stitch in the back. You can appreciate it a little bit more because the mannequin don't have any hair. And I love the wide cable. Love the combination of the 2 stitches. Now I'll show you the front. Well, like this is in the front. I love this hat. I love red. So this one is my favorite. So I hope you guys can see the stitch in the front. So I hope you guys like it and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you are not already a subscriber. And if you make these hats and you want to send me some pictures, you can do it through my Facebook page, Ruby Stedman, or you can find me in my Instagram, Ruby Stedman Crochet. Please share my video with friends and family, that way you help me grow here in YouTube. I wish you have a beautiful day.